All right, so have you ever stopped to think about how many sensors are around you right now? Like, really think about it.
Probably more than you realize.
Yeah, I mean, they're everywhere, right? In your phone, obviously,
hmm
in your car. Even your thermostat is probably packed with these tiny little devices gathering information and making decisions. And all these sensors are part of this massive and growing market that we're going to dive deep into today.
Yeah, it's fascinating, actually. We're talking about the miscellaneous sensor market. It's not a term you hear every day, but it covers a huge range of technologies and applications.
And it's a big market, too, like really big.
Oh, yeah, for sure. In 2024, it was valued at like 5.61 billion USD. And by 2032, it's projected to reach 8.81 billion. That's a compound annual growth rate of 5.8%. So, it's not just staying steady, it's growing, and it's growing fast.
And that makes sense, I guess. I mean, sensors are becoming even more important as we get more connected, with the Internet of Things, everything becoming smart.
Exactly. And that's kind of the mission for our deep dive today. We're going to identify the top players in this market, like who are the companies really driving this growth. And then we'll touch upon some of the up and coming competitors and, what it takes for new players to enter this market.
Perfect. Sounds good. So who are the big names in miscellaneous sensors?
Well, the top five, as it stands right now, are Honeywell International, Siemens AG, ABB Limited, Emerson Electric, and STMicroelectronics.
Okay, so let's break those down one by one. Let's start with Honeywell International. What makes them so dominant?
Okay, so in 2023, Honeywell's total sales were 36.5 billion USD. And out of that, their sensor sales were about 3.2 billion. So that gives them a market share of like 15%. Pretty significant.
Well, 15%. That's a lot. And what kind of sensors are they selling to get those kinds of numbers?
Well, they have a really diverse range of sensors. They cover a lot of ground. So things like temperature sensors, pressure sensors, gas sensors, proximity sensors, and a lot more.
And where are these sensors being used?
Well, they're in a bunch of industries. Automotive, aerospace, industrial automation, those are some of their biggest markets.
I see. And beyond just, having a lot of different sensors, is there anything else that gives Honeywell a competitive edge?
Yeah, they're actually really big on research and development. So they're always pushing the envelope, coming up with new and better sensor technology.
Can you give me an example of that? Like, what kind of new technology are they working on?
Well, one area they're really focused on is smart sensors. And these smart sensors, they're not just collecting data, they're actually able to analyze the data and make predictions.
Okay, like what kind of predictions?
Think predictive maintenance. So, in a factory, let's say, they can use smart sensors to monitor the equipment and predict when a machine is likely to fail.
Oh, wow. So they can fix the machine before it actually breaks down.
Sure. Exactly. And that saves companies a ton of money and prevents downtime. And, besides their focus on innovation, they're also known for producing really high quality sensors. Like they're super precise, very reliable, and they last a long time, which is really important in those kind of demanding industries they work in.
And where are they selling these sensors? Are they mostly focused on one particular region, or are they more global?
They're definitely a global player. I mean, they operate in over 70 countries.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got Honeywell. Who's next on our list of top players?
All right, so the next one is Siemens AG. They're a huge name in industrial automation, and a big chunk of their business comes from sensors.
So they're kind of similar to Honeywell in that they have a broad industrial focus.
Yeah, exactly. In 2023, Siemens had total sales of 80.17 billion USD, which is, massive. And a decent part of that came from sensors. They have around an 8% market share in the miscellaneous sensor segment. So their sensor portfolio includes things like pressure sensors, temperature sensors, proximity sensors, and motion sensors, among others.
Okay, so they cover a lot of the same ground as Honeywell in terms of sensor types. But do they have any particular strengths that set them apart?
Yeah, I would say that Siemens is really focused on Industry 4.0, which is all about smart manufacturing and digitizing industrial processes.
Yeah.
So they're really good at integrating their sensors into these complex automation systems.
Right. So for people who aren't familiar with Industry 4.0, could you maybe explain a bit more about what that means and how sensors fit into it?
Sure, yeah. So basically, Industry 4.0 is about using digital technologies to connect machines, systems, and people in a factory. So you have sensors collecting data on how the machines are performing, what the environment is like, and then that data is used to optimize the entire production process. And Siemens is a leader in that space.
Makes sense. So Siemens is big on Industry 4.0. Anything else they're known for in terms of their sensors?
Well, they're also really invested in digital technologies and the IoT, the Internet of Things. So they're developing sensors that are not only really accurate, but also really smart. Like they can do real-time monitoring and predictive analytics, which is, pretty advanced stuff. And they're definitely a global company, too. They operate in over 200 countries.
Wow, that's a huge reach.
Mhm.
Okay, let's move on to the next company on our list. What about ABB Limited?
ABB is another really big player in automation and robotics, and they have a strong sensor business as well. In 2023, they had a revenue of 32.24 billion USD, and their sensor-related products brought in about 4 billion, which gives them a market share of around 9%.
9%. Okay, so not quite as big as Honeywell or Siemens, but still a major player. What kind of sensors are they focused on?
Their focus is on high-performance sensors, things like temperature sensors, pressure sensors, current sensors, and position sensors.
And what are the key applications for those types of sensors?
They're really important in industries like power generation, transportation, industrial automation, and robotics. Places where you need really precise and reliable measurements, even in tough conditions.
Right, because if a sensor fails in a power plant, that could be a big problem.
Yeah, exactly. So reliability is key for ABB, and they're also really focused on seamlessly integrating their sensors into their control system. So they're not just selling individual sensors, they're selling complete solutions.
Got it. So they're kind of taking a more holistic approach, I guess you could say.
Mm.
And have they made any big moves recently in the sensor market?
Yeah, they've been investing a lot in smart sensors, especially sensors with cloud connectivity. So that allows for remote monitoring and predictive maintenance, which is becoming really important for companies with, large operations or facilities in multiple locations.
And they're also a global company.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They operate in over 100 countries.
Okay, great. So we've covered Honeywell, Siemens, and ABB. Who's next?
All right, the next company on our list is Emerson Electric. They're a bit less known to the general public, but they're a major force in the sensor world.
Okay, tell me more about them.
So in 2023, their total sales hit 17.49 billion USD. And out of that, about 2.3 billion came from their sensor-based products. So that gives them a market share of about 8.5%. Not too shabby.
Not bad at all. And what kind of sensors do they specialize in?
They offer a good range, including temperature sensors, pressure sensors, humidity sensors, and level sensors.
And who are their main customers? What industries are they serving?
Their bread and butter is in process industries, so oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, food and beverage. They're also big in industrial automation, of course.
Okay, so lots of applications where precise measurements are super important. Like, I imagine in pharmaceutical manufacturing, even a small error in a sensor reading could ruin a whole batch of medicine.
Absolutely. So accuracy and reliability are super important for Emerson, and they're known for their really sophisticated process control systems. They incorporate these high-precision sensors to make sure that everything runs smoothly and meets the required standards.
And are they doing anything innovative with wireless sensors, like ABB?
Yeah, they're definitely on that train, too. They've been developing wireless sensors that allow for remote monitoring and real-time data analytics. It gives their clients a lot more flexibility in managing their operations.
And they have a global presence, I assume?
Yeah, they're all over the place, operating in over 150 countries, so, they're a truly global player.
Great. Okay, so that brings us to our last top player, STMicroelectronics. They're a big name in semiconductors, but I don't know much about their sensor business.
Right, so STMicroelectronics is like a world leader in semiconductors, and their sensor business is a significant part of that.
What's their market share like?
In 2023, their total sales reached 17.29 billion USD, and their sensor business accounted for around 1.8 billion of that, giving them a market share of about 6.5%.
Got it. And what sets their sensors apart? What's their specialty?
Their big thing is MEMS sensors, so that stands for microelectromechanical systems. They're basically tiny little machines built onto a silicon chip.
Tiny machines, huh? What are those used for?
So those motion sensors in your phone that detect when you rotate the screen, or the accelerometers that trigger the airbag in your car? Those are MEMS sensors.
Oh, wow. So they're already all around us.
Yeah, they're everywhere. And STMicroelectronics is one of the leading developers of these MEMS sensors. They make them for smartphones, wearables, automotive safety systems, industrial applications, all sorts of things.
And I'm guessing they're focused on making these sensors smaller and more efficient, right? Because that's kind of the trend with everything these days.
Exactly. They're always pushing the boundaries of miniaturization and power efficiency. And they're also really good at combining multiple sensor functions into a single chip. So, like, instead of having separate sensors for acceleration, rotation, and magnetic fields, they can put all of that into one tiny little package. And that's super important for things like, wearables and IoT devices where size and power consumption are big considerations.
Makes sense. And what about their global reach?
Well, compared to some of the other companies we've talked about, their physical presence is a bit smaller. They're operating in like 35 countries, but their technology is used in products all over the world, so that impact is definitely global.
Okay, so that's a pretty comprehensive look at the top players in the miscellaneous sensor market. But as with any technology, things are constantly changing, right? So who are some of the companies that are emerging as potential challengers to these established giants?
Well, there are a few companies that are definitely worth keeping an eye on. We've got Amatec Inc., Murata Manufacturing, TE Connectivity, Endress, plus Hauser Group Services AG, and Aeroqual. Those are all names that are making waves in the sensor market.
Okay, let's talk about each of them briefly, starting with Emitech Inc. What are they doing that's so interesting?
Emitic is all about precision. They make a wide range of really high-precision sensors for specialized markets like aerospace, energy, and industrial automation. And they're growing really fast, partly through acquisitions. So they're buying up companies with, complementary technologies and expanding their portfolio that way.
Smart strategy.
Mhm.
What about Murata Manufacturing? I remember we talked about MEMS sensors with STMicroelectronics. Are they also involved in that
Oh,
space?
yeah, they're huge in MEMS. Murata is a Japanese company, and they're known for making really compact and low-power sensors.
So they're going after the wearables and IoT markets where size and power consumption are really important.
Exactly. They're also big in automotive and other industries where you need small, efficient sensors.
Okay, and what about TE Connectivity? What's their story?
Heat connectivity is a really big name in like connectors and sensors for a bunch of industries. Automotive, aerospace, industrial automation. But they're really making a push into the electric vehicle market right now. They're developing all sorts of sensors specifically for EVs, which is a really smart move considering how fast that market is growing.
Yeah, that's a good bet.
Okay.
Endress plus Hauser, what do they bring to the table?
So Endress plus Hauser is a Swiss company, and they're all about process automation. They specialize in sensors for industries like chemicals, pharmaceuticals, food processing. They're known for their really accurate and reliable sensors.
So kind of similar to Emerson in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. They're both focused on those process industries where precision is super important.
Got it. And last but not least, Aeroqual. I'm guessing they specialize in air quality sensors based on the name.
You got it. They're all about measuring air quality both indoors and outdoors. They make portable and fixed sensors for monitoring things like, pollution levels, gases, and particulate matter.
And I imagine that market is only going to grow as people become more aware of air quality issues.
Absolutely. So they're in a good position for future growth.
Okay, so we've got a good handle on the key players in the miscellaneous sensor market, both established and emerging. But when you look across all these companies, what are the factors that really determine success in this market? What makes one company stand out from another?
Well, there are a few things that are really important. First, you need to be financially stable. Like you need to have consistent revenue growth and a solid market share.
Right, because you need the resources to invest in research and development and to expand into new markets.
Exactly. Second, you need to have a broad product portfolio. You can't just specialize in one type of sensor. You need to have a range of options to meet the needs of different industries.
And of course, you need to be innovative. You need to be constantly developing new and better sensor technologies to stay ahead of the competition.
Absolutely. And you also need to have a global reach. The sensor market is global, so you need to be able to sell your products all over the world.
Makes sense. And what about partnerships? Are those important in this industry?
Oh, definitely. You need to have strong partnerships with other companies like, OEMs, system integrators, distributors. They can help you get your products into the hands of customers.
Right. So it's not just about the technology itself, it's about the whole ecosystem.
Exactly. And finally, I think it's really important to invest in research and development. That's how you stay ahead of the curve and come up with the next big innovation.
Makes sense. So with all that in mind, what advice would you give to a new company trying to enter this market? What are the key things they need to do to succeed?
Well, the first thing I would say is focus on developing advanced and cost-effective sensor technologies, like really push the boundaries of what's possible.
Mm.
And it's also important to prioritize accuracy, energy efficiency, and integration capabilities.
Right, because if your sensors aren't accurate, reliable, and easy to use, nobody's going to buy them.
Exactly. And you also need to think about cost competitiveness. How are you going to price your products so that they're attractive to customers but also profitable for your company?
That's always a challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Another important thing is to target high growth sectors. Like we talked about earlier, the EV market, industrial automation, those are areas where there's a lot of demand for sensors. And geographically, you want to focus on regions with strong economies like North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific.
Right, because that's where their money is.
Yeah.
And what about partnerships? Are those important for new companies too?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Partnering with OEMs, local distributors, and other players in the ecosystem can really help you get a foothold in the market. And finally, I think it's important to think about sustainability. How can you develop sensors that are not only high performing, but also environmentally friendly?
Right, because sustainability is becoming more and more important for consumers and businesses alike. Well, this has been a really fascinating look at the miscellaneous sensor market. It's incredible to think about how these tiny little devices are impacting so many different industries and aspects of our lives.
It's mind-boggling, really. And it's only going to get more interesting as the technology continues to evolve.
Yeah, like who knows what kind of crazy sensors we'll have in the future. Maybe we'll have sensors that can read our minds or predict the weather with 100% accuracy. Or maybe something even more wild that we haven't even thought of yet.
I mean, the possibilities are really endless.
And with that thought, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the world of miscellaneous sensors. It's definitely a space to watch, folks, because the future is sensing, and it's sensing big time.